All right, that's all of the testimony today, but Sergeant Buchanan is going to be back on cross-examination tomorrow. Let's bring in our guest attorney, Michael Jaafar, to discuss. Michael, weigh in about this particular witness. You know, direct examination and then cross starts. And really, I mean, he absolutely did not have any issue from his testimony with Michael Proctor. And at the end of the day, we know Michael Proctor was not a very good witness for the state. How much does this help the defense?
You know, that's a great question. I didn't think about it. How much does it help the defense? I don't know how much, Judge Ashley, because at the end of the day, you know, Michael Proctor is going to find his way into this case no matter what we do, no matter what the prosecution does. The defense are committed to doing it because we know in their opening statement, I would say more than 50% of their opening statement was devoted to telling us why Michael Proctor is a bad guy. So how much does this hurt the defense, that Buchanan? I don't know, because at the end of the day, he's not Michael Proctor. He had his own independent role in the case. I just don't know if this really helps the defense that much. Michael Proctor helps the defense, but I don't know if the testimony of this witness and his involvement with Michael Proctor, I don't know if that helps the defense that much. I could be wrong, but for now, as I sit right now, I don't think this is going to be this. His involvement is helpful to the defense.
And Mike, you make a great point, because my question was going to be, you know, if in fact the state doesn't call Proctor, will the defense? And one of my feelings about it is a bit risky, but as you mentioned, he's such a big part of their case, and he's really the center point of this whole conspiracy. So if they're continuing along that line, I think you got to get him in. You mentioned him so much, the jury's going to wonder, where is the guy?
You know what? You asked me this question before, and I loved the question, and you asked me before the trial. I was like, you know what? This is one of the biggest mystery of this trial. Is before the trial started, we didn't know, is the state going to bring in Michael Proctor? We now, I don't believe they are, because he was, his superior said he wasn't the only chief investigator. There were two, right? So now I'm pretty confident that the state is not going to bring Michael Proctor. I think it would be a mistake now with what I've seen for the state to bring Michael Proctor. So to answer your question, yeah, the defense is going to have to bring in Michael Proctor, because even just like how we were wondering whether or not the state would bring Michael Proctor, in the war room of the defense, I'm sure that was the most important question they asked themselves for 6 months, right? And they have a contingency plan for what would happen if the state doesn't bring Michael Proctor, because Michael Proctor is their case. He's the best gift that they got in this case, because they were saying that their client was framed before they knew that a misogynistic pig handled her investigation. But now they know that, so he fell into their lap. So they are absolutely going to have to bring him. They have no choice to treat him as a hostile witness, but they have to bring in his filth into the jury, so that when the jury deliberates, because if Alan Jackson's opening statement was so focused on it, his closing statement is going to be basically all Michael Proctor. So he has to bring him in.
And I don't know why they wouldn't bring him in. I just can't figure out a reason why they wouldn't.
It's all of his sort of weird behaviors that create the questions in the case. Got to get that in front of the jury. All right, Michael, stand by. I want to take a break. Let's bring back in our guest for this hour, attorney Michael Jaafar. Michael, I got to tell you, the whole thing with the shoe, to me, is one of the strongest pieces of evidence that supports the state's theory. It's important. And they even got Buchanan on the stand to say he figured he was hit and thrown from his shoes. The shoe was found closer to the curb, which sort of really, I think, supports that theory.
Michael, any personal injury lawyer will tell you that what you just said is 1,000% correct. We handle pedestrian crashes all the time. This is exactly in line with a pedestrian strike, one or two shoes leaving your body, which also shows you the impact that a vehicle has on a human. Just imagine the gravity of an impact that you need to have to lose your shoe when it's buckled up. So I fully agree with you. You said something before this first trial. You said that this second trial has to be different than the first trial, and it must be, and it is. It's completely different. Obviously, the shoe evidence was in the first trial, but everything else has been different. But this is in line with what I now see Hank Brennan's theory, which is he's going to stick to the facts and the logic, some of which we didn't have in the first trial. But the shoe evidence is a big piece of evidence. It's completely indicative of a pedestrian strike, and I mean, if she was framed, I mean, somebody should have had to been a genius to say, let me take off one of John O'Keefe's shoes and throw it there. I mean, it's completely in favor of the prosecution, this piece of evidence.
Yeah, take it there and bury it under the snow. That seems like a bit of a stretch. And I got to say, it's just like Gary Buchanan said on the stand, Judge. He said all the evidence pointed towards Karen Read. And I think, at least as far as his direct examination, I agree.
And I think regardless of what Michael Proctor did, that would be the position of law enforcement. I think that they're saying that that's the case, and I think it probably from their perspective did. So let me ask you this, Michael. Now that we're on this witness, you see how much the state has presented up until now. Do you think there's going to be reasonable doubt? Do you think that the state's new strategy and the way the special prosecutor is laying it out really is in a better way than the first trial so far?
Judge Ashley, my answer to that is 1,000% clear. I think there's no reasonable doubt. I think this prosecution strategy in this case is way better than the strategy in the first case. The battery evidence, the Apple Health data evidence, the GPS evidence, every single piece of it, and then Karen Read's own words, right? Her own quasi-confessions. All of this, I think it's beyond a reasonable doubt. Here's why. Here's what both sides agree to. They both agree on one thing, Judge Jesse. Believe it or not, they actually agree on something. John O'Keefe was found dead in the snow by the light pole in the front yard. They both agree on that, right? They both agree that he arrived at the house a few hours before. The only thing in contention is what happened, what was his manner of death? And based on the forensic evidence that the state has presented, it would have been physically impossible for him to die inside that house based on what they've presented so far, right? By all conservative measures, the number of steps he took on the Apple Health data, you run out of steps by the time you get to the front door, and the number of time you only have, if you walk straight to the front door, you only had 4 seconds to be in the house. It's not reasonable for any juror to think that he died in that house within 4 seconds and then just levitated back to the front yard. So that's my take.
All right, we're going to see what the jury decides eventually. Thank you, Michael Jaafar, as always, for joining us tonight.